I will never forget the way they looked at my daughter that night. The chandeliers sparkled above a ballroom built for royalty, but every jewel in that room turned into a weapon. They mocked her dress, whispered about her hair, and one woman even laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. My daughter, Ava, stood there with her head held high, her hands folded neatly in front of her, pretending that none of it mattered. What cut deepest was not the insults themselves, but the silence of the man who had promised to protect her. Cole, her fiancé, shifted uncomfortably, forced a smile but said nothing. And when his mother, Cassandra, leaned close and said, "Sweetheart, you should have borrowed something more fitting," the crowd laughed as if cruelty were champagne meant for everyone's glass. That was the moment I placed my hand on Ava's back and made a quiet vow. They would not break her spirit. They would not decide her worth. Not while I was standing beside her. My name is Marion Blake, and before I am anything else, I am a mother. I raised my daughter Ava on my own after her father passed away when she was just 12. We did not have an easy road, but we had each other, and that was enough. I worked long nights building a company in silence, not because I wanted to be admired, but because I wanted to make sure Ava never felt unsafe or without choices. Ava grew up with a quiet strength that could not be taught in classrooms. She studied hard, earned her own place as a project lead at a nonprofit focused on community health, and carried herself with a grace that made people want to follow her. She never asked me for more than honesty, respect, and the freedom to chase her dreams. When she brought Cole Whitmore home, she told me he was different. He made her laugh, he listened, and he seemed to treasure her heart. And in those first meetings, I wanted to believe that too. Every mother hopes her child will find a partner who sees them as they truly are. But the Whitmore family was a different world. Old money, sharp tongues, and a hunger to remind everyone of their place. I stayed quiet, thinking perhaps love would soften their edges. Yet as the engagement party unfolded, I began to understand. It was not Ava who lacked worth. It was their vision that was too narrow to see it. The Whitmore estate glittered that evening with every sign of wealth money could buy. Crystal glasses clinked, chandeliers sparkled like constellations, and every guest carried themselves as if their opinions were written into law. In the center of it all stood my daughter, Ava, trying to blend in, holding a glass of champagne she never touched. The first cut came quickly. Cassandra, Cole's mother, tilted her head with a smile too sharp to be kind. "Darling, that dress, it's so modest. Did you find it off the rack?" Her words floated into the air, perfectly timed for others to hear. Laughter rippled through the room, a sound that felt more like knives than music. Then Harold Pike, the family's attorney, leaned close with a smirk. "You know, Ava, marriages like this usually bring a merging of names, of power. What does the Blake family contribute?" His tone made it clear he thought the answer was nothing. More laughter followed, the kind that stings because it pretends to be polite. A cousin in pearls added her own jab. "Oh, sweetheart, you must tell me where you shop." I could use a laugh. The guests around her chuckled, clinking glasses as if cruelty was entertainment. I watched Cole then. My daughter's fiancé stood just steps away, adjusting his cufflinks, avoiding Ava's eyes. He heard it all, but his smile never wavered. He said nothing. That silence, heavy and deliberate, was louder than every insult combined. And still Ava stood there, her posture calm, her chin slightly lifted. She did not lash out, did not crumble. She absorbed the sting with a grace that would have made her father proud. But I knew what others could not see. Behind her calm, she was shrinking, and I would not let her disappear in a room that tried so hard to erase her. I found Ava in the hallway near the kitchen, away from the glitter and noise. She had slipped out quietly, her hands pressed together as if holding herself still. The muffled sound of laughter carried through the walls, but here, it was just the two of us. I touched her arm gently. "Do you feel safe, Ava? Do you feel respected?" My voice was steady, though my heart beat like a drum. Her eyes shimmered in the dim light. "I thought they would welcome me," she whispered. "I thought love would be enough. But tonight I feel small, and when Cole doesn't speak up, I feel invisible." I cupped her cheek the way I had when she was a child. "You are not invisible. You are the brightest thing in any room. But respect isn't something you wait for, it's something you insist upon. If you want me to stay quiet, I will. But if you want me to stand beside you, I will not hesitate." She nodded slowly, drawing in a deep breath. "If it gets worse, if they try to humiliate me again, I'll give you a signal. Just a squeeze of your hand." "Then that's enough," I told her. We'll face this together. For most of my life, I kept my work tucked quietly behind closed doors. People saw me as a widow raising her daughter, and that was just fine with me. They never knew that each night, after Ava was asleep, I sat at a desk covered in notebooks and drafts of contracts, building a company from the ground up. Blake Quantum Systems was never about fame or headlines. It was about integrity systems that kept data honest, contracts that could not be twisted, and partnerships built on transparency. I never wanted my name flashing across magazines. I wanted stability, fairness, and the freedom to protect the people I loved. I had been offered interviews, profiles, even photo shoots for business journals. I turned them all down. To the world, I was simply Marion Blake, mother of Ava. And that was how I wanted it. Because in my eyes, power used loudly is often wasted. Power used quietly at the right time can protect. I taught Ava the same lesson. You don't need to shout, I told her, echoing her father's wisdom. You don't need to prove anything to people who cannot see your worth. You just need to stand steady. That night, as the Whitmores sharpened their words and laughter, I thought of every deal I had written, every contract I had defended. All of it had prepared me for one truth: power is not about crushing others. It is about protecting the quiet person in the room. And this time, that quiet person was my daughter. The weeks that followed were a steady drip of pressure, each demand wrapped in polite smiles but heavy with control. Cassandra called Ava with suggestions that sounded more like commands. The dressmaker I chose will handle your gown. You'll want to appear worthy of our name. Ava, ever gracious, nodded along at first, but I could see the way her shoulders tightened after each call. Then came the guest list, entire pages crossed out, replaced with names from the Whitmore circle. Family friends of ours, neighbors who had known Ava since she was a little girl, erased without apology. It is better this way, Cassandra said. A bride should be surrounded by the right kind of people. Harold Pike, the family attorney, brought a draft of a prenuptial agreement. His words were smooth, his tone almost kind, but the document was cruel. It offered protection for Cole, of course, but buried within were clauses that would limit Ava's independence. It's standard, he assured her, just to make sure the family legacy remained secure. And through it all, Cole stayed silent. He wasn't unkind. He took Ava to dinner, laughed with her, made promises in private. But when his family drew their lines, he didn't erase them. He just stepped back, hoping the storm would pass without him having to choose. But storms don't pass when silence feeds them. They grow stronger. And every time Ava's voice was pushed aside, every time her choices were dismissed, I felt the pressure pressing down on both of us. They wanted her to bend until she broke. What they didn't understand was that she was not standing alone. One evening, after yet another phone call filled with corrections and conditions, I sat with Ava at our kitchen table. The same table where she once did her homework, where her father and I used to talk late into the night. I told her it was time to decide what we could accept and what we could not. Together we wrote it down. 3 simple boundaries. First, respect in private and in public, no exceptions. Second, a prenup that protected both parties equally, not one that chained her future. Third, decisions about her life would not be signed away to people who didn't live it. Ava hesitated at first. She wanted peace, wanted harmony. But as we read the list aloud, her voice grew stronger. If they cannot meet this, maybe this wedding should not happen at all, she said quietly. We also made a plan. If the Whitmores crossed the line again in public, Ava would signal me with a squeeze of my hand. If she felt unsafe or humiliated, we would walk out together. There would be no scenes, no shouting, just calm dignity. And that night, Ava sent Cole a message, clear, simple, without anger. She told him these were her boundaries. She told him she needed his support. We saved the message, her words preserved like a promise to herself. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "We don't beg for chairs at someone else's table, Ava. If they cannot make room for you, then you and I will build our own." The morning of the wedding dawned bright and deceptively calm. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, casting golden patterns across the marble floors. But beneath that beauty was a current of tension, and I felt it the moment we arrived. Our family was quietly moved to the far corner of the ceremony tent. Rows upon rows of distinguished guests filled the front, while those who had known Ava since childhood, her teachers, her closest friends, were placed at the back, as if their presence mattered less. Ava squeezed my hand once, a silent acknowledgement that she saw it too. As the guests settled, Cassandra took the microphone under the guise of offering a toast. Her gown shimmered like a crown jewel, her voice carrying through the tent. "Today, we welcome Ava into the Whitmore family. Of course, with time, she will learn what it truly means to be one of us. Standards, traditions, expectations. Marriage is, after all, about rising to meet what is worthy. The words were sugar-coated, but the meaning was sharp. Laughter rippled softly among the crowd, polite yet cruel. Ava's shoulders stiffened, and I felt her hand tighten in mine. I looked toward Cole. My daughter's fiancé stood at the altar, shifting his weight, his eyes flicking nervously between his mother and Ava. He opened his mouth once, then closed it again, retreating into silence. In that moment I knew. Silence was not neutral. Silence was agreement. And while my daughter stood alone in front of hundreds, shrinking under the weight of their judgment, I felt the vow I had made in the ballroom harden into something unshakable. If Cassandra pressed further, if the Whitmores tried to strip Ava's dignity away in front of the world, then I would keep my promise. I would not let their voices define her worth. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a test of whether love could stand against cruelty, and whether a mother's strength could shield her daughter when silence failed. Cassandra's voice rang out again, cutting through the air like a blade. Before my son makes his vows, we should be honest. What exactly does your family bring to this union, Ava? Wealth? Standing? A name people respect? Her words drew gasps from some, smirks from others. The cruelty was no longer hidden behind politeness. It was naked and deliberate. I felt Ava's hand squeeze mine, our signal. She lifted her chin, but her lips pressed tight, and in that instant, I understood. She wanted me to stand with her. I stepped forward, calm and steady. My voice was even, carrying without needing to rise. Those questions have already been answered. Ava sent her boundaries, respect, equality, shared choices. They were ignored. And now, here we are. The tent fell silent, save for the rustle of silk and the faint hum of cameras as guests lifted their phones. Cassandra's smile froze. Harold Pike shifted uncomfortably, clutching his folder of documents. Cole looked stricken, his face pale as he realized the moment was no longer under his family's control. I continued, each word measured. For the record, Blake Quantum Systems entered into a pending agreement with Whitmore Holdings and integration worth hundreds of millions. That agreement contained conditions, including ethical conduct and mutual respect. Today, those conditions have been violated. I pulled a small envelope from my bag, not with drama, but with quiet precision. Effective immediately, that agreement is terminated. Our work will be directed elsewhere. A murmur swept through the crowd, disbelief turning into frantic whispers. Cassandra's face drained of color. Harold stammered, This isn't necessary. We can renegotiate. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply added, partnerships are not built on humiliation. They are built on trust, and if you cannot respect my daughter in public, then you do not deserve her in private or in business. The words settled heavy in the air. Cole reached for Ava's hand, desperate now, but she stepped back, her eyes steady, her dignity intact. It was not a spectacle, it was truth spoken aloud, and sometimes truth is louder than any insult ever could be. The tent buzzed with disbelief, 100 voices breaking into frantic whispers. Cassandra's face had gone rigid, her smile cracked into something brittle. She stepped forward, her tone suddenly sweet, almost pleading. Marion, surely this can be resolved. We've all spoken in the heat of the moment. Her attorney, Harold Pike, fumbled with his notes, muttering about amendments and renegotiations. The confidence he wore so easily was gone, replaced by sweat and stammering. Guests who had laughed the loudest earlier now shifted in their seats, suddenly uneasy with their own silence. Cole finally moved, reaching toward Ava. His voice trembled. I'm sorry, Ava. I should have defended you. Please, let's just go through with it. But the words were too late, and even as he spoke them, his eyes darted nervously toward his parents. That split second revealed everything. His loyalty was still divided. I placed a hand on Ava's back, steadying her. We don't need to fight or argue, I said gently. We've already chosen our path. There were no raised voices, no drama. Only a firm boundary drawn in plain sight. Security didn't drag anyone out. No chairs were overturned. People simply sat with the weight of their choices, the silence now sharper than any insult. Ava and I walked out together, heads high, leaving behind a room that suddenly felt much smaller. The Whitmores had wanted a display of power. Instead, they had received a lesson in dignity. And dignity, once claimed, is something no one can take away. That evening, our house was quiet. No chandeliers, no polished marble floors, no audience waiting to laugh. Just the hum of the kettle on the stove and the familiar creak of our kitchen chairs. Ava sat across from me, her hair let down, her makeup washed away. She looked tired, but she also looked free. I poured her a cup of tea and set it in front of her. For a long time, we didn't speak. Finally, I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "You don't have to be impressive to be treated well," I told her softly. "You only have to be yourself. And anyone who cannot honor that doesn't deserve a place in your life?" Her eyes filled with tears, not from weakness but from release. "I wanted so badly for it to work," she whispered, "but I'm glad we walked away." I squeezed her hand. Walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest choice you can make, and you made it with dignity. In that quiet kitchen, far from the noise of the Whitmore estate, my daughter finally smiled. If you have ever felt small in a room that should have celebrated you, I want you to take this with you. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors that decide who gets to come in. First, put your expectations in writing. A simple message can become a mirror of respect or disrespect. Save it, keep it. Second, when money or contracts are involved, make sure both sides have their own counsel. Protection is not selfish, it is wise. Third, create a signal with someone you trust. A squeeze of the hand, a glance across the room. Sometimes that is all it takes to stop harm before it grows. And finally, remember, one cruel joke can be a mistake. 5 in a row is a system. Pay attention to patterns. If someone has ever tried to make you feel small, hear this from me: you are already enough. Share this story with a friend who needs a reminder of their worth. Like this video, leave a comment with where you're watching from, and subscribe for more journeys of quiet courage.